Sexual baggage from previous relationships or things that you've done can be a real problem in your marriage. The question is, how do you get rid of it?
Hi, this is Phil and Priscilla Fretwell here with Savage Marriage.
We're going to talk about how God is healing and restoring marriages today from betrayal, addictions, and the wounds of their past.
And what He did in our marriage, He can do in yours too.
Priscilla, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Today's a good day.
It is a good day for a podcast. And so the question we're dealing with today is a very interesting one, but it's what do you do with your sexual baggage once you get married?
Right. We had sexual baggage when we got married.
We did.
We didn't tell each other.
No, not until 20 years later.
Right. But, we all have sexual baggage. I mean, some people carry a small bag and some people carry a big bag.
Yeah.
And no one is exempt.
Right. Especially in today's world.
Right.
I mean, there's so much sexuality that is driving marketing, promotions, movies, books, everything. And it's impossible. You're bombarded with this stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is, if we were trying to define sexual baggage here in the context of the stuff that's hindering us in a marriage, how would you define that?
I would say it's the things that we've seen or experienced with someone or something other than our spouse. It's something that has drawn us away and influenced us when it comes to our sexual intimacy.
Yeah, it's really things that are stealing our thoughts, right?
Right.
I mean, people think that the most important part of your sexuality is what your body is doing, but it's really what your mind's doing.
Yeah.
And so you find yourself in the middle of trying to have a sexual experience and your mind is doing all sorts of crazy things because you got sexual baggage in your back that is drawing your thoughts away from your spouse.
Right. And this is something that God has put in the center of us. He created this for us to have a sexual intimacy with our spouse, yet we are being drawn away, hindered from having or experiencing true oneness with one another, because there's these things that are floating in our heads while we're being intimate.
Yeah. And I think it stands alone from other types of sin as well. I mean, like drugs and alcohol and gambling, those things aren't a center of our identity, whereas sexuality is. I mean, It's a core part of our identity that God created. And as a result, it's something very different.
Yeah. I mean, sexual intimacy starts with, a spiritual side and then an emotional side and then a physical side. The physical side is an expression. And it's hard to have this expression when there's things that are keeping us from being with one another.
Yeah.
The way that we should be.
Right.
Right. We're doing the sex act, but we're not all in.
Right. Yes, because it's almost like a split personality, right? You've got the emotional part is attaching to previous things that you've either seen or experienced with other people or images, right? And then now today, you're trying to enjoy intimacy, but your mind is being pulled somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard part to do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I certainly had baggage before we got married.
So did I.
You didn't know about it. I didn't tell you.
Yeah.
And
we looked really good.
We did.
Perfect.
On the outside.
On the outside.
Yep.
You were the knight in shining armor, and I was the princess, and no dents or rust on your armor
that anybody could see. That's right. And then I created more sexual baggage for myself after we got married that you didn't know anything about. And but these things were impacting us, and we didn't know why. I mean, I didn't want to tell you about mine.
Right. And mine either. I mean, for over 20 years, I kept my stuff nicely hidden, and it impacted my sexuality. And I didn't know about yours. And it took us over 20 years to find out.
Yes. So even though we looked good on the outside, we had stuff going on the inside that neither one of us knew anything about.
Yeah. And this all impacted us negatively.
Yeah. Yeah. We really lacked an emotional connection during our sexual intimacy.
Right. There always seemed to be a third party in our bedroom.
Right.
And there was.
Yeah. It was these images.
Right.
Images and thoughts that were floating around. But, it comes down to you have to believe that sex is more than a physical act. It's really an expression of what's happening, or it should be an expression of what's happening spiritually and emotionally. And that should be feeding the sex, not the other way around. So many people think the sex is feeding the spiritual. Well, they don't even really think spirituality.
No,
they think emotional, right?
But not spiritual.
Not spiritual. But it's really, from God's point of view, it's first spiritual, then it's emotional, and then finally it's an expression of what God is doing in those areas. And that's really the way He's designed it.
Yeah, but we see it as, a physical act of sex, right? 7 ways to get a great orgasm. But what we really want is real intimacy with our spouse. And we want to get rid of these thoughts and images in our mind and have a real emotional connection with no hindrances.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was wanting to be one with Priscilla sexually, but I didn't even really know what that meant, and I was struggling to get rid of all these thoughts from previous relationships and pornography and things like that when we were together. So we'd be together, and those other thoughts start bombarding me, and they really start stealing away my time with you.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, those times could have been beautiful times for me to create new images and new thoughts that would control my mind. And then, but I didn't let it occur like that.
Yeah. Well, and I had the same problem, right? Because I'd been introduced to porn at the age of 15 while babysitting, being nosy and finding some magazines at the neighbor's house, and or even watching movie on cable, right?
Yeah.
And so I had these thoughts in my head too that stayed with me, that I felt like forever.
Yeah. So here we are for over 20 years dealing with this, and neither one of us know that we're both struggling with images in our mind
and having group sex.
Yeah. I mean, it's like group sex, right?
Yeah.
It's you, me, and all these images and thoughts and previous things all invading and wanting to steal from us.
Right. And I believe that people are yearning for a real, authentic, satisfying sexual life with their spouses, and wondering why can't I get it? What is missing? What is the missing part? Magazines promise, everything if you just learn the right technique.
Yeah, it's all about the technique.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's really spiritual oneness with your spouse and the union of your souls that makes the difference.
It really is. I mean, without that, all you're really dealing with is animalistic lust at that point, and God really intended it in such a better way than that. So we're going to be sharing about this and talking about this today and what we've discovered in our own life, because it was something that we were both dealing with. We didn't realize it. We just knew there was something missing, and we wanted to be free from that.
Yeah, we wanted to be free from it. And even with the groups that we have had in our home with Savage Marriage, they have said the same thing. They have expressed that this is a common problem for them. So we know that this problem exists with people. It's just no one's talking about it.
No, nobody's talking about it. But we can tell when we bring it up in a group setting, people's heads are nodding, because everybody has a sexual past. There's things that have happened. It's normal for people to want to explore their sexuality on who they are in that area of their life. So they've been impacted by whatever they've seen or heard or done, and all that stuff comes in to the marriage.
Yeah. Another thing that we did, was that we kind of wanted to hide. Nobody's comfortable in bringing this out. It's more comfortable just to leave it alone and hide it, and never have to hope it doesn't show its ugly head.
I think that's right. And that's really attacking probably the very first thing we wanted to share with everybody on the problem here. Is the traditional thinking is you can bury this stuff. If you bury it long enough, it will just go away and won't affect you. You rationalize that it happened before marriage. I mean, this is all my thinking, right? Happened a long time ago. You were not even involved. It was me and other people. Before we got married, before I knew you. And that's ignoring the things I did after we got married. But, the thinking is this stuff that happened in the past will stay in the past.
Right.
And it's not going to impact you. It's embarrassing. And who talks about this stuff before you get married?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're trying to look good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing you want to do is say, hey, your knight in shining armor's got a porn problem, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not what you're going to talk about.
Yeah. But this happens to all of us, there's so many similarities with other people when it comes to this.
Yeah, it really is. And, I will tell you that I think for us, when we were dealing with this, one verse that was really instructive to us is Hebrews 13:4. And this is the one dealing with the marriage bed. Many people quote this, but it says the marriage bed is to be undefiled, for God will judge the adulterer and the fornicators. And so the way I had looked at this was that the marriage bed cannot be defiled. And I'm sure a man came up with that definition, because what I thought that meant is once you have the marriage bed, there's nothing you can do to file it. The gloves are off, everything goes, and we should get rid of all our inhibitions and just move forward. So what that meant to me is all the things I had seen or imagined, or in magazines and movies, that's all fair game. That's what's going to happen, because we can't defile the marriage bed. But I don't think that verse is saying that at all. It's a way that self-serving men want to interpret that verse, but that verse goes on to say that God will judge the adulterers and the fornicators.
Yeah, and I mean, we all have our part in that, right?
Yeah.
So, it happened to us, and we actually defiled the marriage bed prior to getting married.
Yeah, the real question is, I think everybody agrees adultery defiles the marriage bed.
That's an easy one.
That's an easy one. You're married to your wife, sexual immorality with somebody else, or images in your mind, anything else, because Jesus said, if you lust after a woman, it's adultery, right?
Yeah.
So that defiles the marriage bed. The question is, what about things before your marriage? So it's interesting here. This verse is sometimes translated adulterers and fornication. Sometimes it's adultery and sexual immorality. So that word sexual immorality, the question is, does it mean the same thing as adultery, or does it mean something different? If it means the same thing, then why would they repeat it in the verse? So what I came to understand is that it means something different. And what it's talking about is sexual immorality before you get married. And that's the reason some versions translate this as fornication, because fornication, by definition, is only sexual immorality before you get married. And so that becomes the real question mark here. And people try to convince ourselves, and I tried to convince myself, that all this stuff that happened in the past before we got married, it's not going to impact us at all. But I think we're just lying to ourselves.
Yeah, we are. We're lying to ourselves, because these are the memories of previous relationships. And, it proves that sex is not just a physical act, that the most important organ in your body is your mind.
Yeah.
It drives everything, and it even drives this.
Right. So on one hand, we're trying to convince ourselves that all this stuff in the past can stay in the past and we can bury it because it doesn't affect us. Then on the same hand, we're with our spouse and it's affecting us. Yeah. Right. And everybody knows that. Our minds go other places, and they should have been focused just on our spouse.
Nobody wants to be honest about this.
No, they don't. I mean, the last thing in the world that you're going to want to do is, you've been sexually intimate with your spouse, and you say the next morning, hey, honey, I just want to let you know, while we were intimate last night, I was thinking about somebody else. Just want to be open with you about that.
It was your best friend.
Yeah. I mean, something like that, right?
Nobody wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that we started seeing and was so key to this is in 1 Corinthians 10:13, the verse says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such that is common to man. See, in the middle of these situations where we don't want to share something, the root of that is what I've done or what I've thought or who I've been with, whatever this is uncommon, and you're a weird, sick pervert. Yeah. And don't tell anybody, because they won't love you anymore if they really know.
You will be rejected.
You will certainly be rejected, right?
If anybody knows about this.
Yeah, that's right. So as a result, we bury it because we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, this is one of the lies that the enemy really gets us. And that would be both spouses on that. And, what's going on inside your head.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, what's going on inside your head?
You're afraid to bring it out.
Right.
When you first told me about the porn use in the massage parlors, I was devastated. I just was like, my whole world has just shattered. And I really did not know what to do. But God led me to a place of also seeking healing for my own secrets and shame. And He did an amazing restoration in my life. And part of that restoration was getting rid of the secrets and the shame. There's a lot more to it, but that was one of the key things.
Yeah. And Priscilla, I have to say, at that point when we were going through that and I had decided I had to get rid of this and tell you what had been going on with me for all these years, I was focused on me. I was the problem. I was the freedom. I needed the freedom. I needed the healing. I had no idea where you were in that. And to see that God was able to plant a seed of freedom in you, just like he planted in me, and see that blossom and see what he did in our family and our friends and all this stuff has been unbelievable.
Yeah.
God wants freedom for everybody.
He does.
He does. And, but there's always a price, right? Freedom comes with a price.
The price.
And I'm so thankful Jesus paid a price.
Amen.
Jesus paid a price for our freedom. He came to set the captives free. And it's so wonderful to be able to walk in that freedom. But there's always a point that we have to act on things that Jesus has asked us to do. And part of that is bringing all these things out of the darkness and bringing it into the light.
Yeah, I mean, porn isn't the only problem that brings shame and secrecy into a marriage. There's so many facets of what can bring shame, right? I mean, I have, experienced things and that I felt shameful for. One of the things I did was that caused me to have images in my head, the theater of my mind, was romance novels. I mean, some of these romance novels are pretty paint of explicit pictures, and so, you put all this stuff in your head and then you think of it. I mean, it is a theater, right? That's how God created our minds to be. Everything is captured.
Right. Well, it's creating the fantasies, and nobody wants to talk about that. But, you've never done anything you haven't thought about doing. So the root of this, the sexual fantasies, are some of the things that really can take us to a deep, dark spot. And they can be created by so many things, media, music videos, all this type of stuff, books and words.
Even fashion shows, huh?
Even fashion shows,
What is that thing? Victoria's Secret models fashion show? Huh?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much in there, right? That can come in and grab your mind and take you to a different spot. And, words, even people telling you stories. I remember in high school and college, or jokes, high school and college, guys would talk about their sexual conquest and exploits and all that stuff gets in your head, takes you to a place that you don't want to be.
Yeah. Well, this stuff isn't just reserved for men anymore. I mean, women are affected by all of this too.
Yes.
And the same thing that is happening to men with addiction to porn is happening to women. I mean, the percentages, are not that different.
I think men, it is a fallacy. People think this is solely a men's problem. And men are dealing with this more than women because they are very visually oriented. But in the theater of the mind is the place. I think that's one of the reasons, they traditionally say the women are more gravitated toward the romance novels and things like that. It's easy to pull people in and create fantasy and imagination there. So if we want to get rid of all these images in our mind, how do you bring this stuff up to your spouse and talk about them?
Well, I mean, I know that with us, well, at least with me, I had to bring the things that were in my mind, the sin that was in my mind, where I thought, I didn't think, but, sometimes we give the thing of, oh, God doesn't see what's in my head.
Yeah.
He does. And I had to really bring that before God and look at it the way he was looking at it and confessing those things to him, but also confessing to you, confessing your sins one to another, you will be healed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that verse in James 5:16, confess your sins one to another and pray for each other so you'll be healed. I'd always connected confession to confessing sin to be forgiven, but this verse doesn't say anything about forgiveness. It talks about healing here. And that's what we needed.
Yeah, we needed an emotional healing, and it was done through confession. Asking God to help us see our sin and the way he sees it caused us to be broken before him.
And it put us in a perfect place to pray for one another.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because at the place that we came in front of each other and said, we need healing from this, it's stealing the moments that from us. We want to lay this in front of God. And then I think especially, Priscilla, as you started sharing with me your own images, I never would have imagined that. I mean, you were, from my point of view, you were perfect, never dealt with any of this stuff, right? And for me to share all the garbage in my life that I had allowed to monopolize my mind and my thoughts for so many years, and then you to come back and say you had your own stuff, not just the same stuff I had done, but nevertheless, you had things that were stealing your thoughts. That was an amazing revelation, but it brought us together in a marvelous way to be able to be that vulnerable in front of one another.
Well, it's interesting because that vulnerability makes you lean into one another, right?
Yeah.
You want healing for your spouse, and they want it for you.
Yeah.
You're leaning into it. But a lot of people, I bet, are hesitant to confess because they're afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid of, if I confess these details, these thoughts, these secrets, my spouse is going to ask me questions.
Right.
And I'm not so sure I want to explain.
Right.
And it's important to explain, right? It's important to explain the what happened, the where, who you were with, and all this stuff. And that sheds light into the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I mean, we are more comfortable with a compact explanation, right? This is the amount I want to share, no more. And please don't ask me any questions, right?
Right.
Right. And, but what we're looking for here, this isn't a communication point. This is an experience point.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking to create an experience, an intimate spiritual experience between a husband and wife who are willing to risk it all, to be vulnerable with one another because they are pursuing something greater than that. They are wanting to experience an amazingly intimate relationship where sex isn't the driver, but it's the result.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it takes some time to get there, but the risk is worth it.
It is.
It is worth it. But I realize it's scary, I realize it's scary.
Yeah.
But part of it is coming before your spouse, and you're not like reading the newspaper to them. You're expressing the anguish of your soul, your desire to be intimate with them in an amazing way. And there's something that's standing there. There's an obstacle in the way that you want to be free from. And you're asking them, will they help you be free?
And hopefully they say yes. They lean into their spouse's confession and want to see healing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of people are hesitant. They're fearful because they're like, what questions are going to arise from this?
Right. Well, I was afraid of that. I mean, I had tons of porn exposure since I was probably 11 years old. And then after we got married, you didn't know about all this, but my porn usage was increasing, and I eventually ended up including massage parlors. And so I had memories that were stealing all the intimate moments with you. And then 28 years into our marriage, I said, I'm tired of living like this. And I disclosed everything to you. And that's what we end up talking about, this journey that put us on. And we share that a lot in Savage Marriage.
Right. I mean, people, relate to this because everyone comes into a marriage with experiences and events. They do.
That's right. Well, this was, going through and being willing to share and being courageous was the key to helping me and get rid of my sexual baggage that I brought into this marriage and created during the time. And I was amazed that as we started going back and dealing with the past, how these memories that had such a hold on me, just the power over me just simply vanished.
Well, and your confession also brought to light my own memories, my own images that I had stored in my mind. And since I was 15, and, I never thought they would go away. I thought they were going to be there forever.
Right. I think that's what people generally think. But today I enjoy an intimate marriage with you without any other thoughts. And I just never thought that would even be possible.
Me too. The same thing. But those images in my mind have now let go. and I am free and I am only with you, and there is no more group sex.
Yes, no more group sex. Well, there's so much to talk about on this topic, and you probably have questions, but we're going to be covering that in the next episode, around sexual baggage, about what do you cover exactly? Because I realize there are people that have trauma, abuse, things that they've done that are shameful in their background. And so this is a very, very sensitive topic, but we're going to talk about how to get rid of all this stuff.
Yes, it's all part of the sexual baggage we carry.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that we've gotten rid of ours.
I was tired of carrying it.
Me too. I'm so glad we're free.
Thank you, Jesus. This is Phil and Priscilla Fretwell. Thanks for listening, and please join us next time as we continue talking about how God is healing and restoring marriages today.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Savage Marriage Ministries. Also, please join our Savage Marriage community at savagemarriageministries.com.
And remember, it's God who's at work in all your savage moments.